Okay, we're going.
It'll just be Elliot's head in it, and Kaylin's back.
Okay, if you would please open your books to where we left off. I'm going to back up just a tad bit, not very much, and we'll basically pick up where we left off. So,
Worry about it.
I don't know why I begin every lecture with so, but it drives me nuts when I watch the first part of the video and make sure it's there. Yes. We didn't pray. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I got us off track.
Okay, let's pray. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for these students. Thank you for this Gospel of John. Father, you know that when I was in prayer with friends on Zoom this morning, that we walked through the prologue of John, and it's just, every time I read it, it just makes me incredibly grateful, the lengths to which you went to save us. Thank you, Father. We were in John 1 through 18 this morning because I was leading prayer this morning, so it's probably not surprising to you that I would choose that word. So we're going to just fly through this first part. It's one of the four Gospels. It's the good news concerning the death, burial, and bodily resurrection of Christ. It's one of the longest books in the New Testament. It's one of the best loved books in the New Testament. And it's different from the Synoptic Gospels. The Synoptic Gospels are primarily historical, and John's Gospel is spiritual. And it's different in a lot of ways. We have this little chart that you've already filled out, so I'm not going to go through that. And then it answers the questions that were posed by the Synoptics. We talked about what it means, what synoptic means. So who's the great king of Matthew? It's Christ. Who's the great servant in Mark? It's Christ. Who's the great man in Luke? It's Christ. And then John emphasizes evangelism, his thesis statement, right? John 20, 30, and 31. Now, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And so we talked about how it emphasizes evangelism, and then we just, I think that's where we stopped. Do you already write down John reports 7 miracles?
Yes.
Do we have time to talk about that?
We talked about.
So maybe just a little bit?
Yeah, we'll a little bit. Great.
So Jesus performed a bunch of Gospels. The curriculum says more than 40. That's based on what's written in the Gospels, what we know. He did more than 40 that we know. Could he have done some miracles before they began recording his life, or before he began his ministry? I don't know, maybe. But I will say that he may quite likely perform much more than 40 miracles. We just have over 40 written down. And John chooses from those miracles, these seven that best suit his purpose, which is what? What is his purpose? What is he trying to tell us? That Jesus is God, that Jesus is the Christ. He's trying to tell us who he is. And we'll find out in the very first miracle that he records, the water turning to wine. And when I was younger, I was like, why is that such a I mean, it's a miracle for sure. But why not heal someone? Why not raise someone in the dead? This is your first miracle, man. Go all out. But what we're going to see is that what he was saying is, I am the Messiah. That miracle. And you'll learn about that when we get there. So John is trying to tell us who Jesus is. When I wrote my first Bible study on John, I wanted to name it, Who is this guy? I already tell you that. I mean, because that's the question that John wants us to answer. Who is this guy? They didn't like it. They usually did like the titles for my... I got a few in there, a few of them might, but I wanted to name my Exodus title, Are We There Yet? I thought that was really good, you know. And they didn't like Who is this guy either. And I can't remember what the other one was, but yeah. That's what John wants us to come get an answer to. That's the question John wants to answer for us. Who is Jesus? He is Messiah. He is God. And so he only records those miracles that fit his thesis. These were written that you may believe that Jesus is Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life. And then the next one is that he focuses on Judea rather than Galilee. I'm sorry that this is a small map, but y'all are probably fairly familiar with Israel's history, and you know that Jeroboam and Rehoboam, sons of Solomon, got into a little tiff, and the country split, right, into northern and southern. Now, that's not true by Jesus' time, but largely, like geographically, that was still true. And Judea was in the south, and Galilee was in the north. That had been called Israel, and this was called Judah. So the Synoptic Gospels, because they're talking about what Jesus did, and they have many more miracles, most of those miracles take place in Galilee. And so the Synoptics spend a lot of time with Jesus in Galilee. John spends most of his time of Jesus in Judea. Is that because he had read the Synoptic Gospels and he's like, I think they need to know about what he did in Judea? Possibly, but I think there's also this focus on Judea thematically for what he wants to do, because it is in Judea where Christ's most important works, his arrest, his trial, his death, his resurrection, took place. And in fact, a whole, it's almost half of the book of John concerns the last week of Jesus' life. So that means that this is what he's really saying. Look, this is what you really need to know. There's an old time preacher. I don't even know if he's still alive. His name's Charles Stanley. My husband loves him. And he has this southern drawl. I don't know if you know Andrew Stanley, but Andrew Stanley is Charles Stanley's son. And it has a southern drawl. And when he's preaching, and he gets to a part that he wants to make sure everybody hears it, he'll say, now listen. And I think that's what John's saying with this focus on Judea. Pay attention to Judea. It's not that Galilee was unimportant and what Jesus did there was unimportant, but his most important work was in Judea, and those times in the temple that we see in John as well, which is in Jerusalem, which is in Judea. So the other thing about this, though, is that Jerusalem, in particular, was not. It was in Judea. It was in Roman controlled Judea, right? And so the whole, all of Israel was Roman controlled. But Jerusalem especially had a Roman presence, a strong Roman presence. So I think one reason why John is focused on Judea and on Jerusalem in particular is because who is the gospel for? The Jews? Sure, it is. Only the Jews? No. And so you've got this crossroads. You've got these people that are not Jewish. We have these Gentiles in Jerusalem who are also hearing the gospel. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. So I think this heart of Judea with the many people and tribes and tongues. Listen, and this is an aside, but it's important. The picture in Revelation is every tribe, every tongue, every nation worshiping. And it just makes me sad that we have Christians who aren't interested in worshiping alongside someone who looks 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whatever time church is the most sacred created power. And John's saying every tribe, every tongue, every nation is to be worshiping before the throne of God. And so God's gift of salvation reaches beyond the Jews and extends to everyone who believes. And that was in Judea, particularly in Jerusalem. There were all of those different kinds of people there. So for all those reasons, I think the focus is on Judea instead of Galilee. And so John emphasizes Jesus' own words concerning himself. There are some monologues in John where but a lot of it is conversations that Jesus had with the woman at the well, with the Jews, Jewish leaders, and a lot of it is those conversations. You might be wondering how John, in particular, and perhaps Mark, who was informed by Peter and Matthew as well, could remember exactly what Jesus said. And you need to remember that it was an oral culture. We're a written culture. The only reason I can remember so many things is that God allowed us to have the smartphone. Like there's, but in those cultures, you memorized. That was how you learned, and disciples were required to memorize their teachers. And so they would have memorized what Jesus told them. They would have had it committed to memory. That's why I know that by the end of the year, John 1 through 18 is not going to be hard. I rarely have anyone. Why? Because you memorized it, and you memorized it. And so that's why he could remember the conversation with Nicodemus. That's why he could remember the sermons, and why the other gospel writers could remember the sermons of Jesus. But John emphasizes Jesus' own words rather than concerning himself, rather than his words about it. So John shows us who Jesus is. And John is not trying to prove Christ's deity so much as he's letting Jesus Christ prove his own deity. I think it says something like that. John is not trying to prove Christ's deity so much as he's letting Jesus Christ prove his own deity. He's letting Jesus tell us that. And I think I already told you that my freshman year religion teacher told me that told his classes that nowhere did Jesus claim to be God. Everywhere Jesus claimed to be God, not just in words, but in deeds. He walks on the water. Only God walks on the water. I think that's in Job. I'm in Job right now, but I'm not that right. I'm pretty sure that's Job. And so his concern is for us to understand who Jesus is. John 8:25, and I don't know if I have this up here. I do. So these are the Jews. He's talking to the Jews here in John 8. And the Jews said to him, and they've been in conversation with each other, right? And so the Jews said to him, "Who are you?" And Jesus said to them, "Just what I have been telling you from the beginning." He's saying, "I've been telling you, not just with my words, but with my deeds. I've been telling you from the beginning. You're just not listening." Kind of like me in math class. I didn't pay attention. And if you don't pay attention, you don't hear, right? Which is really the best apologetic to pay attention, because then you remember. But he tells them, "I've been telling you this. You're just not listening." So over and over and over again, Jesus is telling us who he is. So John keeps himself out of the account of the life of Christ a little bit. And if you read through it, kind of figuring out how much John says about himself, it's very little. And as we've already mentioned, he never names himself. And that's because John is not trying to prove Christ to you. He's letting Jesus prove his own. So as we go through this gospel over the year, um, uh, I think we can see John's strategy. He lets Jesus speak for himself about who he is, quoting Jesus a lot and recording a lot. Not many miracles, but recording what he did a lot. John also, and this is from me, not from the John also focused on believing in the death and resurrection of Jesus. Almost, as I just told you, almost half of the book covers the last week of Jesus' life. So he really wanted us to get that. What does all of this mean? Beginning, I think, with the resurrection of Lazarus in. So let's apply this a little bit. Jesus Christ ought to, well, we'll get to that. I'm not going to do that right now. So here's the basic question that John is asking us. Who is Jesus Christ? Who is this guy? And perhaps we should make it a little bit more personal. Not just saying, who is this guy? Who is Jesus? Maybe the question should be, who is Jesus? You don't get brownie points for knowing a lot about the little kids at a children's film, and I don't know if your church is still there, mine doesn't. It would really work. And there's always some kid that no matter what the question is, Jesus, right? Because it's always the right answer. But I think the question is, who is Jesus? I say. That's the most consequential question you've ever asked. And I hope you ask it. Who is Jesus? And that's what this year is about, is for us to see who Jesus is for ourselves. And I want you to understand that there's a difference between between who Jesus is and any other historical figure. You can think of historical figures like Benjamin Franklin and George Washington, and you know facts about those people. But they're just facts. Because all of them are dead and in a grave. Jesus is different. He's alive. And he will be alive forever. Oh, our life to him. And so my plea to you, and I am passionate about it, get to know Jesus. It will change your life. Over the next 3 years, I'll share some of my journey to Jesus. But I'll just tell you this part now. I've had people say to me when I've given my testimony, surely you weren't that bad. Even my own sainted mother at one point said, honey, you weren't that bad. I'm like, you are old and you don't remember stuff. And people say, I can't imagine being. That's because I'm a new creation in Christ. A couple of weeks after I trusted Christ, somebody came up to my mom and said, what's Cynthia Amy? And I said, and my mom said, she found Jesus. If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. She is a new creation. The old is gone and the new has come. And that is my desire for every one of my students. That you would come to know Jesus in way that rocks your world and changes your life forever. Right? And as we walk through this, I want you to get to know Jesus, to know his heart, and to love him more. And I'm going to say something that's strong, but this is the way I really feel. And it may be factually wrong. Doesn't matter, because this is how I feel. In 3 years, you're going to be donning a cabinet gown. And when you walk across that stage, if you don't know Jesus, if you don't love Jesus, now I know somebody would tell me, oh, it's not yours. But I believe this is the last great calling God has on my life. And I'm going to do this until I am physically, mentally incapable of doing it. Because I believe this is what I'm supposed to do, is to pour my life into teenagers, to tell them about Jesus. And people ask me all the time, do you still love your job? And I have a pat answer. I tell them I got the best job. I've got the best job on the planet. I get to talk to teenagers about Jesus. What can be better than that? So that's what this year is about. Let's get to know Jesus. Amen? Let's pray. Father, thank you for loving us. Thank you for these students. Thank you for leading us to pay attention to Grandma about Jesus. May we get to know Jesus. Now, just like last year, we'll take a quiz every time. I use these quizzes less as assessment. I count them as quizzes in the grade book, but I use them less as an assessment and more as a learning tool. So nearly always, you will be able to work with people around you to take these quizzes. And you'll be able to use your book and your notes, and so most of them are open note, open book, open print. Now, this first one we're actually going to do together as a class, because I want to lay, this is what I'm expecting, because it's open book, open note, open friend. I'm expecting you to do really well. And same with the student. I'm expecting you not to just write down the quickest answer or the first thing that comes to your mind. That's why I let you work in groups, so that you can come up with the best answer, not the fastest answer. So we will do this together. So I won't take a grade on this because we are doing it together, but I will keep filming so that those at home can. Yeah. Okay, just pass it. Okay, give me one more second. Okay, first question, true or false? The Gospel of John is one of the longest books in the New Testament. True or false? That is true. True or false? Because the Gospel of John is called the simple gospel, it is not as important as the other three Gospels. False. False. Number 3, the Gospel of John focuses primarily on the many miracles of Christ. False. Matching prominently uses the word straight away or immediately. That's the Gospel of Mark. Addressed specifically to the Jews. That's Matthew. Emphasizes the deity of Christ. John. That's John. Prominently features Christ's parables. That's Luke. And the only gospel that is not a synoptic gospel. John. That's John. In John's gospel, how many times did the writer refer to himself by name? None. 0. What philosophy considers God to be absolutely good and matter absolutely evil? Gnosticism. According to this study, about when was the Gospel of John written? Yeah, AD 80 to 90, somewhere in there. Now, this says list and describe 2 ways in which the Gospel of John is unique among the other Gospels, but I am going to have you write down all of them, as long as we're just doing this together, because you will see this question again. So what? Yeah, so what's one way that John's Gospel is unique or okay, it's not a synoptic gospel. Yeah, just list them on there. Kind of bullet point them. Synoptic is SYNOPTIC. That one? Yeah.
And we recorded some.
Yeah, he only records 7 of Jesus' miracles, whereas the others record far more.
I can hear lockers closing. There's one that I could have heard like lockers opening.
What's another one?
It like talks about evangelism.
Okay, so it's evangelistic in nature rather than historical in nature. It's evangelistic in nature rather than historical. Laura?
It addresses all people.
It's addressed to all people, not just the Jews. or the Gentiles. It's addressed everyone. Eric. Emphasis Christ's deity. What about his geographic focus? How was that different? Yeah.
Just wanted you to have this.
Right. John emphasizes what Jesus did in Judea. The synoptics are mainly in Galilee. And then, yeah, go ahead.
Like presidential himself.
He never names himself in the gospel. And then this one's, I think, really important. John lets Jesus' own words about himself prove who he is. So John uses a lot of Jesus' own words to prove who Jesus is. Whereas the synoptics focus on what he did, his deeds, and what those deeds say about him. Okay, well done. You've got it.
Doctrine was in
Doctrine.
will.